So, a month and a half ago, I did a preview of a bunch of the sales that came out from the UK, and we're going to try to go through and bring you now some of the prices that the items brought. Many of the items will be things that we talked about before the sale, things that got my attention that I thought were quite attractive, and a few other things that popped up during the sales. And today we're going to talk about the Dreweatts sale, and eventually we'll get around to doing the Woolly and Wallace sale. We're going to talk about the Sotheby's sale that took place in Hong Kong just this past Saturday, of the Okada collection, which did extremely well. I was very pleased to see it. The market is strong over there for the best things, of course, and the estimates were reasonable, so they got it. They had a very good result. So bravo to them. And the Roseberry sale that took place, we're going to cover that as well. But today we're going to talk about Dreweatts. They had two sales over a 2-day period, starting on November 2nd, running again on the 3rd. And overall, they did quite well. I think one of the things that, because of the tariff situation, I think it held back some people. And I saw some softness in there, which is mainly due to because you got to pay a lot of added expense getting them into the United States and moving them around and so forth due to that tax situation that's going on. We keep hoping they're going to resolve it sooner rather than later. It seems that they're working out something, but it seems to be taking also a very long time to work it out, which is hurting the auction market, I think, a bit. But we'll see what happens in the next few months. Hopefully, around the beginning of the year, they'll get it resolved. I suspect not much will happen before Christmas, but we'll see. But at any rate, overall, the Dreweatts sale did well. They had some very nice things. They had some things that sort of took off, and we'll get into them. All right, so let's have a look. This was there was a very nice Kisi weave Mandarin dragon robe. It's a fairly well-known type, ones that we've all seen before. And I just throwing this in because it's to show that the market is still good for them. Now, it brought 5,000 pounds, which is around $6,000 or so, and plus the buyer's premium, which is another 30% roughly. So you add on that, and you're up around 6,007. You're getting up around $8,000 for the robe, which is sort of the range they often sell in. And there it is. This was a particularly nice one, though. It didn't have a lot of wear to it. It looked to be in very good condition. Very nice colors. And it had silver dragons on it. That was the thing I thought was sort of interesting about it. So instead of gilded dragons, it had silver dragons. I think it was a very good example. Really nice piece. And then over to this. This was that bronze that we talked about in the preview for the sale. It had a $4,000 to $6,000 estimate, $4,000 to £6,000 estimate, I should say. And it really took off. And I had commented, I remember looking at this thinking, well, it's missing its bottom plate. And a lot of people don't care about that as much as it doesn't hold as much weight as you would think, even if it's missing, if the rest of the piece is so good. And this one I thought was awfully nice. It was a fairly large one. It was about a foot tall, but the gilding on it was in exceptional condition. It was in really good condition, very fine, and it took off. And in the end, it brought 45,000 pounds, which was around $60,000 plus the premium. So you're up around $80,000 U.S. currency by the time you're done. Very good result, way over the estimate, but good bronzes bring a lot of money. And when you see bronzes like this turn up and they don't bring a lot of money, the chances are it's a reproduction. There are, just as a heads up, there are a lot of very convincing looking bronzes being made in Nepal and Tibet these days that are being wholesaled out, in particular into the EU. We haven't seen a lot of some of the chiseling auction houses down in the southern United States that we've talked about before. They get them, but in Europe, they're turning up a lot. So be extremely careful when looking at bronzes coming up in auctions over in the EU and France, Austria, Italy, these kinds of places, up in Northern Europe, up in Belgium and so forth. Just be very careful. They get good ones, but there seems to be a bounty of them turning up these days, much more than there ever were in the real world. So keep that in mind. But this was a good one, did very well. I was glad to see that. And then the Ming jar. This was something we talked about. I remember looking at this thinking, what a sweet piece of Cloisonne. This is beautiful color, nicely detailed and in very good condition. And this is Cloisonne on bronze. so it's going to have some weight to it. But it wasn't a very big vase or a big jar. It was only about 4 inches tall, 5 inches tall. It's fairly small, about this big, and it was estimated at 2,000 to 3,000 pounds, which at the time struck me as being very reasonable. And apparently, in person, it was extremely impressive. I spoke to someone. Well, somebody emailed me who had seen it and thought he said this thing is going to really take off. He said you should see it in person. He said it glows. And I can see why he would say that. At any rate, it brought 99,000 pounds, or about 120,000 plus the premium. So by the time you're done, you're up around 150, 160,000 US dollars. But it was or more actually. And it was only estimated at 2,000 to 3,000 pounds. So you got a very, very happy consignor there. But it was an exceptional example. It really was. It was beautifully done, and if you took the time to look at it, you don't see these very often. So it's good to go look at them because it helps you spot the fakes. And I talked a bit about the pitting that you often see on Ming and early Qing Cloisonne in particular. Roll right into the 18th century. The enamels would bubble and chip bubble up a little bit, and you get these little pinholes all through the enamels. And if you see a Cloisonne that somebody is trying to sell you as being Ming, and it doesn't have that feature, and it doesn't have lots of little pinholes and bubbles and so forth, and this color palette, if it's got a bright lemon yellow in it, that kind of thing, walk away from it. It's a copy. All right, this was a real one. It was a beautiful piece, worth looking at. Whenever you get the chance, always go and look at things like this in person. And then there were these. These were estimated at 3,000 to 5,000 pounds, a pair of 18th century, probably Qianlong period, on bronze, gilt bronze, Cinnabar. But these were very, very finely carved, and they dated them as being Qianlong. They're either Qianlong or very early Jing period. It's hard to say, but they're awfully beautiful, regardless of, splitting hairs here a little bit on Qianlong to Jing. Because of the Jing period, they continued to make a lot of the things. They did some very, very fine work that were very similar to the things that were made during the Qianlong era. And you had this beautiful pair of covered bowls. Notice how deeply carved they are, and very, very finely detailed. And the gilding on them is still in very, very good condition. They were not marked. That's the only thing that kept them from going really crazy, but they did very well. With a 3,000 to 5,000 pound estimate, they ended up selling for 24,000 pounds plus premium. So you're up around, these ended up going for about $45,000 when it was all said and done, without marks. But the Cinnabar market has been pretty strong lately. We saw some good results in some other sales. It's a very, very active category right now. And then the brush pots, they had a number of good brush pots. This was a particularly good one. It was a Wanli soapstone inlaid brush pot. And this was a tradition that they did in China, of course, where they inlaid brush pots with soapstones. They were doing them right into the 20th century, as a matter of fact. This was an 18th century one done in Wanli wood, very well colored. The coloration on this of the figures really, really stood out, very three-dimensional, and had this lovely sort of Greek key border going around the top. And this nicely shaped base. It was a good detail they added there. And there's a slightly invected lower section here that curls inward, and then these turning lines above it. This was a very attractive little pot, beautifully done, and it did really well. It brought 9,500 pounds plus the premium, or around about 14,000 pounds, or about 18 or 19,000 in U.S. currency. You have to go to do the conversion. I haven't got the conversion rate off the top of my head today. I'm sort of guesstimating, but that's about what they are. But this was a heck of a nice brush pot. And then there was this brush pot, another one. This was a square one, and also Wanli, and inlaid with mother of pearl and so forth, and very nicely done. And it's just a simple constructed box. It didn't have any detail really, other than just being a slab constructed box, but very pretty coloring. Again, very, very pretty coloring all the way around. Couple of little nicks around the upper corners, but nicely joined. And it was estimated, as I said, at around 2,000 to 3,000 pounds. Did much better. It brought 6,000 pounds plus premium. That would be 7,800 pounds, or around $10,000 for this pot. But it was a good one, and it dates probably to the 18th century, like the previous one. And then this one we talked about also in the preview video. I just thought this was very, very nice. It was 17th or 18th century, probably Kangxi period, based on the dating they're giving it. And there it is. Nice landscape, beautifully finished, good color, very warm color on this brush pot. And I like that a lot. I like the figures in the foreground, but beautifully polished down. Very fine work all the way around it. And this did quite well. It brought £2,000 plus premium around. That would bring it up to about $3,500 with a £1,000 to £1,500 estimate. So that went over the estimate. And you're seeing very good things going over their estimates. And there were a couple of things that slipped through, but overall, we're still seeing, even in the middle market, what I call the middle market, the things that sell for under $100,000, you're seeing a lot of interest in things that are very good quality, and are reasonably estimated and reasonably priced. And all three of these brush pots met that criteria. And here we go. And here's another one. Now, this was a wonderful sleeve. This is a beautiful Wutsai transitional period sleeve vase, or Shunji period. They're dating it because of the coloring, I guess. It was estimated at £3,000 to £5,000. But the deal with this was it had a crack in the bottom, had a hairline in the bottom, which does obviously impact price. But the coloring in this blue shading that they add behind the aubergine tree branch coming out is something you do see on Shunji and early Kangxi pieces than you saw in transitional pieces. It was sort of an added feature, it seems, from that period. Somebody could correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be the case. Anyway, this is a very attractive sleeve vase, despite the crack in the bottom, and that's probably why they gave it a fairly low estimate of £3,000 to £5,000 because of the condition of the base. Here's a picture of it, and you can plainly see it's got a fairly significant spider crack on the bottom. It's probably stable, and just so you know, a ceramicist can stabilize that crack so it won't grow anymore. They can inject adhesive into the crack, and that'll tighten it up, and it won't creep out on you probably, and not in your lifetime anyway. And it went for £20,000 plus premium, or about $40,000 roughly, including when you add the buyer's premium and then convert it into US dollars. So that was a good price. And we've seen these before. It was either Sotheby's or Christie's. Somebody had one that was quite similar to this a year or two ago, as I recall, and I think it brought about $80,000 or $90,000. It was a very attractive piece of porcelain, and this one measured about it was 38 centimeters, so it measured about 16 inches tall, so it was decent size too. And then over to this, the pair of Wanli bottles with the dragons on them, and we're still with their covers. And these are quite nice, and they were estimated, I think, very reasonably, £4,000 to £6,000, and they ended up going over that £7,000 plus the premium, or around £10,000 in in British currency. That brings it up to about 12,000, 13,000 US roughly. But these were very nice, and they had covers. And as I said when I was talking about these before, I remember saying you don't often see them with covers. All right, the form we've seen before. It's a fairly well-known form for the Wanli period, but to find them with the covers on them and the characters around the collar at the top, and these very exuberant dragons and a nice deep blue, it was a very good assemblage. It was a very good package, and they did great. They did just fine. And these were not enormous. They were a little under about 11 inches tall. Hold on a second. I'm sorry about that. That was a robocall from our mayor here in town, letting people know that there will be basically free parking downtown during the Christmas season. Because we have meters normally running down there, and the meter maids are a little aggressive sometimes. So anyway, he was just letting everybody know that we have free parking. That was nice. Anyway, we do try to shop in town. Always try to shop in your own community so the money stays in your community. Just as a little side note on that, on buying things, we try to buy things locally as much as we can, because it's good for the businesses in town, it's good for the neighbors, it's good for everything, and you're not sending it off to Amazon or some company on the other side of the country that you're going to get no benefit in your community. All right. Back to work. This would really work. This is fun. Anyway, Wanli vases did very, very well, and they had their covers. I thought that was a very nice situation. Good collectible. And then this coral ground reserve bowl with a chin lung mark on the bottom. Let me see how big. This was fairly. These are usually pretty small, 4 or 5 inches or so. Where are the dimensions? they're 13 centimeters in diameter, so about 5 inches wide. This was a nice bowl. I like this a lot. I thought the details were good on it. I thought the color was very, very good, and I thought the estimate was right of the ballpark. And it ended up selling. The hammer price was the high estimate, 7,000 pounds, or about $8,500, $9,000 plus the premium. So it came in all done and in around 12,000, 11 or 12,000 US. But a very, very pretty bowl. This is a very popular bowl among collectors. Collectors love this bowl. They love the colors, and I think the curved linear design of the leaves and everything that's going on there is just extremely pretty, and it's a nice, delicate bowl. And they feel nice in your hand when you pick them up. They've got a certain feeling to them. At any rate, 7,000 pounds was the hammer price on it. And like I said, with the buyer's premium and everything, it comes up to about 12,000. And then this was that interesting bowl, the Western Chamber plate. And this was sort of done like an expert bowl, but it was Daoguan. And it appeared to be Daoguan market period, and had a very modest estimate, 800 to 1,000 pounds, which I thought it would blow away. And I think a lot of people agreed because it was very unusually decorated. At a glance, it sort of looks like a China trade place with Mandarin scenes in the middle, but it's really not. This is really a Chinese domestic example. And I love the guy sitting in the moon windows staring out at the pretty girls on the patio, and they're wearing their beautiful clothes, and this lovely gilt background with the willow trees over them, and just an absolutely charming scene. And then in the background you have all the buildings sort of floating around it, implying the neighborhood where they are, the part of town where they live. Very, very attractive. And this was a nice thing. This was a genuinely nice thing. It was about 8 inches. I think it was 8 inches or so in diameter, something like that. 20 centimeters, yeah, 8 inches in diameter. It was estimated at 800 to 1,000 pounds. It ended up going for 4,200 pounds plus the premium, so around 5,500, about $7,000 all done and in. But it was a really lovely piece, very, very good piece, and it's about the story of, of course, the romance of the Western Chamber. You see it often on. It's a very popular story. You see it on a lot of porcelain, a lot of paintings, and carved into the sides of brush pots and things. All right, and then over to this, a pair of Chinese Celadon, these big jars. These are the ones that have the crescents on them that turn up. It's funny, there were a lot of these in New England for some reason. I don't know why. I know a couple of people that had pairs of these, and these are nice ones, and they had their original lids. The lids again on these are often disappear. They often disappear, but they're very, very attractive, and they always do well. They always do pretty well. These are how big were these? Now these were not particularly big ones. These were only about 8 inches tall. I've seen them bigger. I saw there was a pair that was in somebody's house. I knew that they were about 12 or 13 inches tall. They were a good bit bigger, and he sold them for a lot of money. But these are very nice, and they were estimated at 20 to 30,000 pounds. They ended up going for. Well, Buck likes them. 28,000 pounds plus the premium, or that would bring them up to around about $45,000 roughly for the pair. But beautiful, beautiful workmanship. And they were marked, of course, on the bottoms. Here's the base of it right there. And they look absolutely fine as far as I can tell. And then over to this. These are sort of bargains of the day. These are 2 Cantonese watercolors of Taoist immortals. And I think I mentioned them, and I thought, boy, they're 200 to 300 pounds. That's for nothing. And like I said, always leave a bid. These went for 90 pounds plus premium, or around, that works out to about, premium, about $140 for the pair. Somebody got a great buy. And these weren't especially big, so they wouldn't have been too bad to ship. There we go. These were very nice, very well colored. They appeared to be in good shape. Late 19th century work, but nice work, good work. And Taoist figures I think are very interesting to look at. And for some reason, these slipped through. I don't know why. It just seems. It tells you that there's no retail crowd at this sale. There wasn't much of a retail crowd, because these are exactly the kinds of things that retail buyers love to buy just to hang in their house as a pretty painting. They just like them, and some reason somebody got an absolute steal. And again, I think this was because of maybe the tariff situation. Somebody didn't want to ship artwork and so forth. But these weren't especially big. They were each image. It was site size of each was 25 to 33 inches, and they were sold without reserve. You always read the notes. There it is at the bottom. Sold without reserve, and Dreweatts wasn't kidding. They sold them $45 £45 a piece plus premium, bargain. And then over to this, the double gourd snuff bottle done in coral. I like this a lot. I thought I'd comment. I just thought it was so pretty, beautifully done, very curvilinear. I love the stopper on top, little jade stopper up there, jadeite stopper. But nice color to the coral. It was a beautiful, deep, rich color, and the carving was exceptional. Very well done all over, underneath, everywhere. And apparently, a lot of people liked it. It was started. The estimate was £600 to £800. It ended up going for £3,200 plus premium, or around about 5,000 US. But a very lovely little Daguan era piece of coral carving, early coral. And then over to this, the little melon snuff bottle. I like this also. This was something we commented on because it had the calligraphy running down the side. And I've had this bottle before. I've actually had this might even be the same one. I'm not sure. But it was a type that was produced during the 19th century. This was a beautiful one, and it had calligraphy, and then the calligraphy was highlighted in green against this very nice pink background. The stand it looks to me to be later. Nobody cares about that. It was estimated at 800 to 1,000 pounds, and ended up going for 4,000 plus the premium, or around that comes up to about 6,500 US by the time you're all done. But a very, very nice snuff bottle. So the snuff bottle market right now seems fairly healthy for the best examples. And they also, in the sale, I noticed they had some groupings, you may recall, of lots of the more typical cylindrical landscape decorated snuff bottles. Those the tubular shaped ones, groups of 5 in the sale. And some were underglazed blue with underglazed red. Others were just underglazed blue. And they seem to do pretty well. They all seem to bring somewhere around $350 to $450 a piece. Some brought a little bit more, so it shows that market is still good. But there's a good way to buy them, incidentally. If you're a snuff bottle buyer, always look for lots that might have one piece in it that you want, because snuff bottles are pretty liquid in the market if you want to sell them. And very often, if you buy a lot of 5 or 6, you can buy it, take out the bottle you want. I've said this many, many times, and sell the rest, and you get back all your money. You end up with the bottle for free. So just keep that in mind. And because you didn't you're probably not going to get back more than you paid. There's no tax. You're just getting a complete refund. Is how it works out if you're a dealer doing a bit of purchasing for your own collection. All right, and then over to this. I love this plate. And this was another bargain, and I have no idea why. Now, this plate had been at Lion and Turnbull. I did some looking because it looked so familiar to me. And this had been sold at Lion and Turnbull back in May for about £800. And either it didn't get paid for, or I don't know what happened. I have no idea what happened. But this was a very nice dish, and I think people recognize it. And again, it's being reoffered. There must be something wrong with it. Probably people get that mindset, and they won't bid on it a second time. It's the same plate that sold for £800 plus premium, and here it is going for £160 plus premium for 6 months later. So if you missed it the first time, I hope you got it this time. But always look around for things that have been reoffered. Google Lens, incidentally, is a very handy way to find pieces. If you have a picture of something and it's somewhat unique, like this is a very unique look to it. If you take this and put it in Google Lens and search it, you may be able to get a little bit of the history of the piece and find out if it's been offered before recently. Not always. Often they're not in there, but often they are. If the auction house properly tags their images, you'll probably be able to. And they still have it online, you can often find these things. Anyway, just a side note on that. But somebody got a great buy on this. You end up paying about $250 for the plate, all in and done, in U.S. currency. And then there were these very attractive Celadon ground 19th century or late 18th. How did they date them? Probably, they said they're 19th century. Okay, they did them in the 18th century too. That's why I was wondering. They look like they're old though. Boy, these look like good ones. If they're 19th century, they're early 19th century, I believe, judging by the shape and the color. But these are Celadon ground. These are fairly good size, with underglazed blue and white decoration and so forth. Technically, these are fairly complicated to do, with the white ground and the blue, and then the Celadon. It's a multi-step process, and some of this work may be in relief off of the body, which it appears to be the case up in here, up at the top. Anyway, and I love what they did with the handles. The bottoms of the handles are blue, and the upper halves aren't, and the same on this side, not as much. And I think that's sort of an interesting thing. I don't think it was a restoration. These are estimated at $800 to $1,200. They end up going for £2,800 plus premium, or around, that brings you up to around £3,600, or around 4,500 US dollars. But they're quite nice. These are very, very decorative. Whether you're buying Chinese art for decor, or you're just buying it because you like to collect interesting examples. These were interesting. I always think they're interesting anyway. And they measured 40 centimeters in height, or about 17 inches apiece, roughly. All right, and they were very, very nice. And then hopping along over here, the Japanese part of the sale. We've talked about these big jars in the past, and Dreweatts does well with big Japanese Arita jars and Amari jars. They've had a few in the past. They had a couple of sales a few months ago, and they did very well. And here's another pair of them. And these tend to be fairly large. These are 61 centimeters tall, so they're a little over 24 and a half inches tall each, with Fu Lion lids on them. And these are very, very well done. I've always liked these. There it is, lots of gilding. Notice the gilding is, again, in beautiful shape all the way around. And let's see, early 18th century, yes. And they ended up going for £4,800 plus the premium, or around £6,000, or about 7,500 US dollars. There must be somebody delivering something. I'm not sure what that is, but he usually barks at when people come to the back door or the front door. All right, and then over to this, the Japanese six-fold Kano school screen. It was estimated at $4,000 to $6,000. I think somebody got a pretty good buy on it. It sort of with the buyer's premium. It ended up going for about £5,000, or about 6,000 US dollars. But a nice looking pair of screens. Japanese screens are relative bargains right now, compared to other screens. And Chinese screens aren't. It's funny. I'm always surprised at how little even good Chinese screens sell for. There were some Japanese screens in the Okada sale that did very well, and we'll talk about those. But typically, screens are sort of, just, no matter how good they are, they seem to be going under the radar for some reason. I don't know why. You can even buy a great Kangxi Coromandel screen these days, and I mean they're not cheap. They're $150,000 to it, or and down. But they don't bring the kind of interest for some reason that I would think they would, because there's so much work in them, and they're so spectacular and beautiful. If you've ever, I was at those of you, I don't know if you saw the Peabody Museum video I did. In the opening shot, I walk into one of the Chinese sections, and there's a big Coromandel screen on the left. It's one of the most beautiful ones I've ever seen. And I don't know I don't remember how long they've had that. I think that's been in the museum for about 50 years at this point, but it's a heck of a nice screen. Anyway, this one did fine. It brought about, like I said, about $7,000, including the buyer's premium in U.S. currency and so forth. And then hopping along over to here, the Japanese bowl. I thought this was a wonderful bowl. It was a 17th century, second half of the 17th century bowl, about 9 inches in diameter. And it was estimated, I think, for nothing, £600 to £800. It had it sold for £400 plus premium. And this bowl has been published, I believe, on top of it. Beautiful exterior decoration, and you may remember the interior here. There it is, and it's got this wonderful, wonderful bit of enameling on the interior, with the Fu Lions scrolling around in the center, and just a vividly, beautifully done piece of porcelain. Absolutely great. And somebody got a heck of a buy, I think. That came out to about $600 or $700 US. with the buyer's premium and everything. And that was a wonderful piece of porcelain. And again, the estimate wasn't off. The estimate by the time they were done was pretty much right in there, but still. And then there was this one. This was also a great buy. This was that Kakeyamon style Arita bowl, and it had this very nice soft enameled, a soft underglazed blue rather of flowers along the edge. It looks like the edge of a pond coming up. And there's the interior with this wonderful dragon sort of scrolling in the center, and this very nicely done border on the outside. This was a beautiful piece, and it did pretty well, but it didn't bring its estimate really. Well, it brought 800 pounds plus premium, or about, I guess that comes out to about 1,040 pounds. So it hit the low estimate, and then you convert it into U.S. currency, that comes out to about $1,400 or so. But it was an awfully nice example. It was a very, very good example. So I hope one of you bought it. I know a number of you collect Japanese things, and I hope one of you bought it. Okay. So anyway, that's sort of the flavor of how the sale went. They had some highs and lows. Some of the jades didn't do particularly well, but they had a few cute jades, a few nice ones. But jades these days, there's a big loss of trust among collectors in the jade world because of all the shenanigans that's going on with jades, because they've gotten so good at faking the surfaces. And you want to really, really be careful out there. And they're faking early types of jades, Western Han, all the early ones, Shang, all those. They're faking even the ones from the second half of the 19th century. They're starting to make copies of, because the market is so good for them. So at any rate, be very careful. And I don't blame the auction houses. Some of them are almost impossible to tell the difference these days, and the line is getting blurred on jades, I'm afraid. Once they figure out the scale and proportions and really get that down to a science, the jade market's going to have a lot of trouble unless the pieces have enormous rock solid provenance, predating all of this more recent developments. So just keep that in mind. And if you buy something, always keep if there's any possibility that's going to be debated later, always keep the receipts. Try to anyway, especially if you're spending money on things that require provenance increasingly, including jades, pottery pieces, stuff like that, things that might require a TL test. Always keep the slips with all of the background on the piece if you can get it. It's important. It's going to be more important than ever in about 10 years. All right. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Have a good time on Thanksgiving with your family. And visit us over at bitamount.com. Check out the newsletter page. We've been revising it. I know a number of you have noticed. We've been including bits and pieces from other things, because we frankly have found eBay not worth following anymore. It's just the way it's gone. I took a look at it the other day to see what's anything up there, and there were 320 active auction lots on the entire site around the world in the Chinese antique category, and a lot of them were fakes, which is it's just getting worse and worse and worse. I don't know what's going to happen there, but we started out sharing a lot of stuff on eBay, as you all know, a number of 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and it's all changed. And part of it, I think, is a lot of sellers have just given up using the site because of the non-payment issues and the headaches dealing with the customers that eBay seems to attract. And I can understand it completely because I've dealt with them myself. All right. Have a great time. We'll be back Friday with the regular video, and have a great time on Thanksgiving with everybody. All right. Bye-bye.